Okay, it's now 4 o'clock and we're just about ready to start. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. My name is Frances Meek and I'm Education Services Manager at the British Nutrition Foundation. And I have with me Roy Ballum, who has been involved for a number of years with us working on the Oak curriculum and lessons, and in fact Roy was our curriculum design lead and wrote the curriculum and lessons. So what we're going to do today is going to be looking at particularly for primary schools, thinking about practical tips for using Oak lessons in the classroom. And what we're going to be covering, I'll cover that in a minute. Let's just do a little bit of housekeeping first of all. So the webinar is being recorded, so if you've got any colleagues that you think this might be useful for, please do let them know that the recording will be available. If you've got any questions, if you could save them to the end, pop them in the chat box and we'll answer them then. And then at the end of the webinar, what we'll ask you to do, please, is to complete a short online evaluation. It's always really useful for us to know what went well, what could be improved, but also how else we can support you, particularly around Oak cooking and nutrition lessons. And there is an evaluation which will be available for you to do that. So what we're going to cover today is we're going to look at an overview of the Oak food curriculum for Key Stage 1 and 2. We're going to think about particularly about good food teaching and how what has been created for Oak National Academy will support that. What's particularly available for you and your school at primary level. And then we're going to think about some pragmatic approaches, because we know that there are challenges around teaching cooking and nutrition and in primary schools. So how can the Oak lessons and what's been created for you help with that? Thinking about support for your pupils, and there's some great ideas available for your pupils. Reviewing your CPD opportunities. It's great that you're here with us today, but what else can you do around CPD? And then also some next steps. But before we move on, what I do like to do at the beginning of these sessions is really just say thank you to the All Saints Educational Trust, who through their generous funding has enabled us to do this training for you and then help to disseminate the Oak cooking and nutrition curriculum and lessons. So thank you, Roy. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hand over to Roy, and he's going to cover this first part, which is going to be looking at the Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2 cooking and nutrition curriculum.
That's great. Well, thanks ever so much, Frances, and good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us, and those people that are catching up on catch up as well. So a quick overview, first of all, of what's in the Oak food curriculum for Key Stages 1 and 2. Essentially, there's a lot for you. It's a fully sequenced and coherent curriculum plan, which is, we believe, accessible and diverse. Now, if you want to find out more of the detail about how the curriculum was developed and the different sort of policies and so forth, there's actually another presentation that's been recorded. So there's lots of stuff that you can find out there. But tonight is a very quick overview because we've got so much to cover. And we've got planning for teaching right the way from year 1 through to year 6. So we've got lessons running right the way through the primary phase. And in fact, there are 72 lessons that you can pick from. You could do all of them, you could do one of them, you could do half of them. It's entirely up to you. And there are 12 for each year. So 12 in years 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You can do the maths. And all the lessons are delivered via units of work. And very broadly, the units are broken into 4. So there's always a unit around cooking. There's a unit around sort of healthy eating and nutrition. There's also one around where food comes from, so the food provenance. And lastly, there's kind of like a social context, something that brings it all together. And these already support the national curriculum as we're going forward. And there's also threads that run through the curriculum. So although I've just told you there are these 4 main themes in the units, actually there are threads that run through as well. And if you look on the right hand side, you can see underneath in the graphic, there's something called highlight a thread. And there are lots of different threads. So for example, you might be really interested as a school for really focusing on health and nutrition because obviously you want to look at the well-being of your pupils. Or perhaps you're really interested in sensory evaluation and the sensory aspects of food. Or perhaps it's around sustainability and the environment. And you can filter the different lessons, highlight those threads, and actually just get those that are of use to you. And I'm going to give you a quick demonstration of the Oak website very, very shortly. Now, all the lessons on here are completely flexible. And that means you only use what you want, and they're fully editable as well. So you can make them and adapt them for your pupils in your class. And it's free, which I think is a really, really positive thing, being an ex-teacher myself. And all of this covers the D&T Cooking and Nutrition curriculum too. But saying that, it does also look slightly into the future and adds other dimensions too, which I've already talked about, for example, the sensory and also the sustainability work too, because they're really interesting areas. And all the lessons, they're progressive, so they link to each other. So when we got the units from year 1 up to 4, and let's say, for example, we're taking the cooking unit, we've been very, very careful to make sure the units on cooking progress from year 1 to 2 to 3 to 4, 5 and 6. So basically the concepts get harder, the understanding is more challenging. Or around cooking, for example, we might be focusing on finer motor skills, for example, which might lead from something like very simple spreading through to something like using a knife very carefully and accurately to slice a tomato or cucumber, for example. It's all in here. But also the lessons are standalone. So not only are they connected, but you can go in, take one lesson, one slide from one lesson, and use that straight away. Now, as I said, there are year groups of information. You can see here on the screen. This is just from a helicopter view of all of the year groups. This is, for example, Key Stage 1. So we've got year 1 and year 2. These are all the units. And then in a unit, we can go in and see the lessons. So here in our example in year 1, we've got a unit called Food from Plants and Animals, and it's got 3 lessons, 1 plant or animal, food sources, and let's make a potato salad. Because what we try to do is to try and make it interesting and engage and motivate the learner too, through from practical activity, or it might be sensory evaluation too, sensory testing. And then when I go into a lesson, you get more of the detail. You can get the lesson slides, the quizzes, which I'm going to go through with you very, very shortly. Now I'm going to hand over quickly to Frances, and she's going to talk to you about how the Oak curriculum supports good food teaching in school.
Thanks, Roy. So yes, so when we were putting together the curriculum and the resources, what we wanted to do was really take a step back and have a think about, if we're going to write a new curriculum, which we were doing, what documents, what guidance would we really want to look at in order to put together a curriculum which was helpful and good for now, but also looked forward to the future, but also took into account all of the aspects about what makes good food teaching. So one of the first ones we looked at was the Food Teaching in Primary Schools, a Framework of Knowledge and Skills, which was actually put together by the British Nutrition Foundation, the Department of Education, and also Public Health England as it was then. And this particular document, if you haven't seen it yet, is a really good guide for you to use in school for yourself as a teacher, or if you're the subject lead, or you can pass it on to your head teacher or senior leader, or even your governor who's responsible for food in your school, because it really sets out the knowledge and skills that are required for somebody to be a good food teacher in primary schools. We also have one for secondary schools, but this is particularly for you in primary. And then following on from that, we put together a couple of other documents and guides, which are the characteristics of good practice. And these really exemplify that what is good practice for teaching food and nutrition. So we've got a framework of knowledge and skills, and then the guides, which then give really good examples of how you can actually put that in place. So we've used these 2 or even 3 documents, because we've got one for teaching pupils with additional needs, to really guide what we've done putting through the new curriculum. We've also based the lessons on Food a Fact of Life and the guidance on Food a Fact of Life, the key facts, and what we now call our roadmaps. Because it was really important for the DFE, when they were putting together this new curriculum, and Oak National Academy, that the new curriculum was based on a curriculum that was tried and tested in schools. So the lessons, although they're new, are based on Food a Fact of Life. And then also we followed guidance from the Design Technology Association, and they put together the programme of study for cooking and nutrition. And one of the main guidance we followed from them is around the use of heat in primary schools. So their guidance is that at Key Stage 1, any practical food lessons should be done without the use of heat. But then when you move into Key Stage 2 and you progress the skills and the knowledge, as Roy was saying, the lessons progress right the way through from Key Stage 1 to Key Stage 2. We've built on that, and we've introduced some practical lessons in Key Stage 2 which use heat. So therefore pupils are really extending their knowledge. And then also research on food skill development. And Roy has mentioned this already, and particularly about motor skills, and making sure that what we're asking you to teach the pupils are actually able to do at that age and phase of their primary time with you. Also thinking about subject content. So we've tried to be thinking about what pupils need now, but also what pupils will need in the future, and actually what really creates a good curriculum. So we're making sure that we've covered health and nutrition, cooking, provenance, so that's where food comes from, hygiene and safety, sensory, science, particularly as you get towards year 6 and then the transition to secondary. We've looked at food science, the culture around food, and also heritage. So there's really lots and lots of rich information and knowledge that would support good teaching for food in your primary school. Thanks, Roy.
Great, thanks, Frances. So what is available for you and your school? Let's have a quick look together, shall we? So there's a lot. As I mentioned, there's 72 lessons, 12 in each year. So that's in years 1 through to 6. And you can just see a variety of the different types of resources here. So you've got detailed curriculum plans that you can access, really helpful when you're putting together your scheme of work or your scheme of learning, as well as, for example, your lesson plans. There are 72 slide decks, so the lessons themselves, which are available as PowerPoint or Google Slides. You can download and edit them, make them your own, as I mentioned. Great images on those, as well as great facts put in. There are quizzes, so there's a starter quiz as well as an exit quiz that you can use, and they're available again as a Word document or as a PDF. And there are worksheets, and the worksheets are linked directly to the slide information that's in there. And the slides are great because they're really built in a way which really kind of makes sure that we don't overload pupils as we're going through. So there's been a lot of care and attention, even things down to the size of the font and even the font style as well. So lots of details have gone into creating this. Plus, there are videos, and these videos are great because what they do, they go through the whole lesson and all the explaining, looking at the quizzes, and they're really useful for you. And we're going to look how they might be used in the classroom, as well as maybe useful for CPD too. And also there are recipes. So there are lots of different cooking kind of lessons that we can go through, as well as sensory lessons too. And we've been very mindful in picking those recipes that we feel might be really helpful to help demonstrate and actually get people to use and learn about different food skills as well as other embedded learning too. So they've been really important. Plus, we need to make sure they were relatively healthy, so we haven't got lots of sweet things. Plus, also, we wanted to make sure there weren't ingredients that were far too expensive. So we wanted to make sure it was manageable, and Frances is going to talk a little bit more about that very shortly. So let's have a quick look at what's available on the Oak Academy website. And it's very simple to access the information. So when you go to Oak, first of all, you go in from teaching resources point of view. You can do a keyword search like nutrition or cooking. I like to just go into the key stage. So let's go to Key Stage 2, for example, go straight in, All the lessons are there. Now, not just cooking and nutrition, Oak have worked really hard recently to produce your whole curriculum for you. So it's really worth sharing this with your colleagues if you can. Let's go to the cooking and nutrition. You can see here it's got all the different units for Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2, or Key Stage 2 in this example, and I can then also filter it by just looking at one particular year. So let's pick Year 4. And in Year 4, I'm just going to look at the Eat Well guide. That's one of my favourite subjects. And then I'm going to click on My Meals, the Eat Well Guide way. And then on the slide here, you can see you can download all the resources all at once, which is great because it saves you time. You can also share the lesson. Perhaps you're going to share it with a colleague at school, for example. And there's also a great feature on this where you can use AI to help to amend and adapt the lesson to make it more suitable for you. You can then go into the lesson slides. So there's some great ways. It always starts with an outcome, which is pupil focused. There's always features vocabulary. It's very vocabulary rich, looks at keywords. And then it also divides the lessons into manageable chunks as you go on. They call them learning cycles. So you can go through this and then you can start to get all the information that's on the slide deck. There's also some great information around lesson details about those key learning points, well as the keywords. And I also really like the teacher tip as well, just to the right-hand side. Just give some practical, pragmatic advice as you go through. And there's also some misconceptions, which might be a great way to start the lesson, really to get pupils thinking. And as you go down, you can then access the video as well as the worksheets, plus also the starter quizzes too. So there's a lot of information on here that you can access, as I say, free of charge. So I'm going to move on to the next bit, which is all around the pragmatic approaches to teaching food in your school. Now, I'm going to hand over to Francis in a moment, but first of all, I just want to deal with about deciding what, why, and how to teach. Now, this is really, really important, and I've given you some indication already about what you could do. Now, through the Oak system, the whole curriculum has been planned for you. And you can access this information on a whole spreadsheet. And it's really detailed, but I think it's great to have a look. And it really gives you a sense check of perhaps what you're covering now, or perhaps what you could cover in the future too. But it's there for you if you want to. And information presented in year groups and as well as in units of lessons too. So deciding what you want to teach, some of that heavy lifting has already been done for you. And I think that's really helpful. There are also some really interesting unit descriptions as well. So in the main image, just at the top, just over to the right-hand side, underneath our rich global food cuisine, you can see there it's listing what key threads are, as well as a description about that unit. Again, that information is actually quite helpful because it really focuses you in like, is this of interest, or what can I do? But one of the key things I really like on the Oak system, and it's true for all subjects, they have this why now? And it's a really powerful paragraph about why you're choosing to teach what you want to teach at that moment in time. And I think that's a really useful way to look at building a curriculum and deciding what, why, and then you've got the detail of how to teach it as well that goes with it. As I mentioned, there are those key learning outcomes which are written from the pupil's perspective, so I will, as well as the key learning points. And of course, when you're looking at your own lessons, you might decide actually the 5 learning points are too much for my pupils, or I haven't got enough time. But actually there's 2 of those I'm really going to focus on and make those the main point of the lessons. And also that great teacher tip, again, in every single lesson. So there's 72 of them, so lots of tips for you to use as you go forward. You'll also find lots of information in additional information. And this is where we've pulled together information just for you, the teacher, really to help you think about some of those pragmatic things, particularly around cooking and nutrition. And what I would say is make it your own. Have a look at what's available, think about what you currently teach and how you might like to adapt it for the future. And a little bit later on, we'll talk about some of the resources on Food Factor Life to help you to do that, for example, using their audit tools. So Francis, I'm just going to hand over to you very quickly to look at planning and managing cooking and tasting.
Great. Thanks, Roy. So, yes, so we've provided quite a lot of resources for you as part of the curriculum in order to help manage cooking and tasting, because we do know that obviously schools, particularly primary schools, have different facilities. You may have your own food room. You're lucky to have a food room that you could use all the time. Otherwise, you could be using your classroom or an area, or you could have access to the school kitchen. So we know that every school is different. So we've tried to provide enough information for teachers to be able to use the resources confidently and also competently as well. So we've provided the lesson slides, as Roy has said. So you've got a full lesson, particularly around practical, which has got the different learning cycles, which explains very clearly what the aim of the lesson is. It's got the recipe in it, it's got the method in it, but then also you've got worksheets and quizzes as well. So you've got a really nice bundle of resources to use for the lesson. But as Roy said, you can pick and choose. You can use the whole lot, or you can just use a small amount of it. You could just use the slides that have got the recipe on, maybe. We've got the videos, and the videos feature Roy, and these model how cooking and tasting could happen in school. So that's a really good one. So you've got a video of the lesson itself, and Roy goes through the whole of the lesson so you can see how you could teach the lesson, and you could actually use the lesson as part of, sorry, the video as part of your lesson, or you could watch it for yourself and actually use that as CPD really to help you understand how you might teach that particular type of lesson or that food skill or that particular topic. We have also got food skills videos as well, which are what we call peer-to-peer food skills videos, and they actually show the different food skills in action. So again, you can find out for yourself what would be the best way to role model a skill in a practical lesson, and also how the pupils should do it. And they could watch them themselves, bit of independent learning maybe, so that they can come prepared to the lesson, particularly for the older pupils. And also thinking about tasting. So obviously tasting is a really, really important part of a food and nutrition lesson, cooking and nutrition, but you've got to do it in a safe and practical way. So we've offered some guidance around that, and particularly to do with the hygiene and safety around it, and making sure that there isn't any double dipping going on and pupils aren't eating as they're tasting, and that you're being aware of any reasons why pupils shouldn't eat or try the foods that you're actually using, your ingredients. We'll come on to that again in a minute, because that's a big part of this. We've also got some additional information which has got cooking practicalities in it. And again, that's going back to not really knowing what different situations are in schools, so providing as much information as possible. So we've suggested perhaps in some recipes the pupils could make them in groups or in pairs, and by that what you're doing is you're reducing the amount of ingredients you need or the amount of equipment you might need, so therefore thinking about cost and space, etc. We're also thinking about modifications to the recipes, so any changes that you might like to make that would actually fit in with your particular setting, your pupils, and then also thinking about different ingredients that you might want to use. So if you want to use something that's in season that would still fit in with the recipe and that would still link to the learning intent of the recipe, or whether you might want to use a different type of starchy carbohydrate, perhaps. Maybe we've suggested rice, but you want to use couscous, or you want to use quinoa or something like that. So you can try lots of different things. We've also provided advice around setting up the classroom. Again, this goes back to different settings, and we've put that together as a blog. So hopefully there's some information there that you might find useful, particularly if you're starting out and haven't really done a lot of food activities before. Risk assessments and health and safety. With all our food lessons, we've identified that an adult needs to be present. So adult supervision is required, because there will be the use of sharp equipment, hot equipment, ingredients, potentially as they're getting older, they could be high risk ingredients like meat and fish. So need to be aware of that. But with regards to risk assessment, we haven't included information about risk assessment because we recommend that teachers and schools go to the national body for the practical activities or practical lessons in schools. So that's art, design, technology and science. And that's CLEAPS in England. And 98%, I think, of schools are actually members of CLEAPS, and you can get free risk assessments from CLEAPS. What we would thoroughly recommend, though, is that when you get those risk assessments, you do something called adapt and adopt. So you don't just take them, put them in a folder and say, tick, I've got a risk assessment. You actually have to adapt that risk assessment to your own setting, to your own pupils, to make sure that you are really reducing the risks that there might be when you're doing practical activities. The other thing is about ingredients. So mentioned changing ingredients to suit your budget, to suit your setting, to suit the season, but also it's really important to be aware of any allergies or intolerances or any other reasons why pupils shouldn't be using or handling some of the ingredients that you've got. So on the additional information, we've added information around the allergenic ingredients that you might find in the recipes. And the important thing for that is to make sure that you are taking into account not only what's listed in the ingredients list, but also what might be on any bottles or any packets that you might be using. And one that often catches people out is stock cubes. They often include wheat, so that's gluten. Or if you're thinking about something like a tomato ketchup, maybe we've got one, I think maybe 2 recipes that use tomato ketchup, and some different brands will contain different ingredients, particularly like celery. Celery is an allergenic ingredient. You wouldn't expect that necessarily in a ketchup. So just be aware and do have a look at all of the ingredients listed. So a little bit more about allergies. So you working in primary schools, you will know, I'm sure, about allergies and intolerances, but we particularly got to be careful about those that are linked to food. And I think quite shockingly, 20% of severe allergenic reactions to food occur whilst pupils are in school. So it really is something that as teachers you need to be aware of. So I've mentioned there's support in the additional information, so do have a look at that. And then think about how you're going to plan and manage food handling and tasting, and do read the guidance that we've put together for you around that to make that it is sure that that is safe for all pupils in your class. We don't recommend, and the allergy charities don't recommend, that you ban ingredients in the classroom because potentially some pupils might be allergic to them. It's all about managing the risk and about supporting pupils to get them to understand how to prevent cross-contamination, so an allergenic ingredient getting in contact with other ingredients, or managing equipment, etc., to make sure that there aren't any concerns for those pupils that do have allergies or intolerances. In order to support that further, we do have some training on the Food A Fact of Life website that we did recently, which is around adverse reactions to food. So actually explaining what an adverse reaction is, an intolerance or an allergy, and then actually how to manage those allergens in the classroom. Now, the main focus of that is in secondary, but the information in it is really valuable for you in primary as well. So I would thoroughly recommend you have a look at that. There's also Natasha's Law, which you may well be aware of. That was brought in a couple of years ago. And that actually is relevant to schools as well as industry. So you're thinking about packaged ingredients and packaged products from that. And then there's a fantastic checklist which was provided by the Benedict Blythe Foundation and also the Food Teacher Centre, which really looks at what is necessary to make a food safe or an allergy safe classroom. So do have a look at that and work through that if you're thinking about doing any food activities, which we obviously hope you're going to do. And then also there is the Natasha Allergy Research Foundation, which has produced some fantastic resources, which are called the Allergy School. And they have those for primary, and they also have them for secondary. And those are resources for the pupils to use themselves to really understand anything about allergies, but how they can support themselves and then also their friends and peers in their school. Okay, thank you, Roy.
Great. Thank you, Frances. That's brilliant. That's really good. So you've got lots of information there all around the allergens, and I'd really recommend when you get access to this presentation, you'll get all those links and you can go directly and find out that information for yourself and make it your own. The other thing as well we wanted to make sure is that we were covering the curriculum content. So what we've really done is to focus on the national curriculum, and we've unpacked it. So this is the current national curriculum. I know some of you may have heard about the curriculum review last week, but there's still a lot of work to go on. And for teaching, that's not going to happen for at least a couple of years at the very least. But what we've done is to take at Key Stage 1 those 2 sentences and unpack that and show what that looks like over 2 years in 24 lessons. And for Key Stage 2, we've taken those 3 sentences and unpacked that over 4 years of those 48 lessons. So we've done a lot of that work for you. So here's actually one of the grids that we've got. We've taken it and we've really tried our best to break it open, to unpack it. And you can actually access this spreadsheet. And this is just one little bit of a sample to show you of the unit. And we've put all the direct links in for you, the lesson titles, the pupil outcome, key learning, and then there's even a direct link as well to the actual lesson link. That's just a year 2 one. So a year 1 and year 2 example here. You can see there's been a lot of detail which has been unpacked just from the national curriculum at its core. We've also covered the government's core food competencies for children and young people, which is a really interesting and valuable document which sets out what people should know and be able to do at different key stages through their life up to 16. And Frances has already mentioned the DFE teacher framework documents too. We've also used heavily on the Food A Fact of Life programme, particularly their key fact structure as we go through, and obviously good practice documents too. Also, we've been keen and very mindful to use the reputable sources of information as well. So we had lots of discussion around the Eat Well guide, for example. And with that, we've actually made a slightly simplified one in Key Stage 1 and beginning of Key Stage 2, but still on the basis of the good understanding of what the Eat Well guide is. But we've also used information from the Food Standards Agency, DEFRA, United Nations and UNESCO, just for an example. So there's lots of information. So another real key thing is about time and resources that you've got. Now, saying this is difficult because sometimes people are really time poor. But the main thing to remember is that with Oak, everything is flexible. So you only use what you want. And that's absolutely key. So if you've only got half an hour, there's definitely information to support you. If you've got a whole day, there's information to support you. If you're going to do food activities 12 times a year, it's all there for you. In fact, there's so much information that you could really pack your curriculum really food rich as you go through. And I think one of the best ways is to break up the lessons to best suit the time that you have. And remember those learning cycles I talked about earlier on. Perhaps one lesson you could break in half and do one bit 1 week and one bit the week after, just to make it more manageable in a primary school classroom. And also you can pre-prepare when you can as well. So if you've got, for example, doing tasting, perhaps yourself or another adult could pre-prepare some of the ingredients, or if you're tasting or cooking, that can all be done to make sure you're using time as efficiently as you possibly can. And for resources, we've tried to put examples of where pupils could do things in pairs or in small groups, for example, just to make sure they can share resources because they're very valuable and there won't be that many of them. And everywhere we've tried to use everyday equipment, and we try to make it simple and multi-purpose too, because we understand primary schools are not like a secondary school food room. We understand the practicalities here. So we've tried our best to make sure it's everyday, simple and multi-purpose too. And as I mentioned earlier on, We've also been really mindful looking at the ingredients too, and we've considered the type and also the quantity of ingredients, as well as even things about where you might store them, because that's important. You don't want food just hanging around in a primary school, particularly if there maybe isn't sufficient storage available for them too. Now, you can quickly discover there's lots of support for your pupils when you go through the OAK curriculum. So, as I mentioned, there are lots and lots of worksheets available as Word document and as a PDF. There are lots of quizzes, the starter quiz and exit quizzes. And what I think is great as well with the quizzes, there's also the answer sheet too, which is great for a teacher. There's also videos which you could play within a lesson, for example, and people could follow along. You could pause and ask them questions yourself, or perhaps they could do it maybe a bit later on in year 5, year 6, as some independent work using the worksheets. And there's also some interactive content, which I won't show you tonight, but if you go onto the OAK National Academy website, you'll find that there's a pupil area and there's interactive content that your pupils could use. So there's real good support for your pupils to use from the very, very start. Now, we've also mentioned, Francis and I tonight, there's some of this information you could use for your own CPD as well. And I think that's a really valuable thing. So how can you use the OAK to support your teaching confidence, for example? Well, one of the key things we've mentioned tonight is about audit what you do and discover what you don't do. And now sometimes it may be you don't do it because maybe you feel that you haven't got the food skills yourself, or perhaps you don't have the subject knowledge, but we've tried to put all this together for you to help you build your confidence and competence as you go on. And you can see just on the right hand side there, there's a really simple audit tool that we've got made available on Food Facts of Life. So, for example, we would suggest that you review your own skills as well, thinking about that audit, and make a plan and just identify any gaps that there might be to help support learning, and use the OAK resources. So you could use them perhaps if there's a small group of you in school. You could review the lessons, think about, well, why is it structured this way? What's the content? What's the style of it? Why is that way? Watch the videos, look for the different explanations that have been used, or the food skills top tips that are given throughout. And also I would say always make the resources your own. You can download them, edit them, they're yours to have. And as I say, there's lots of brilliant photographs, illustrations that have been put in those. And I think you can have a great time actually making these your own and adopting them for your food lessons at school. So I'm going to hand over to Francis now for the next steps for you using the OAK National Academy resources.
Great, thanks, Roy. Just the last couple of minutes, we're just going to talk through some of the things that we feel will be really helpful for you for your next steps. So Roy's already mentioned about the resources that can support your CPD, but we've got some other things as well. So there's an example actually of the interactive CPD planner on the screen at the moment. And I think this is a really fantastic tool to use. It's really nice and simple, and you can just sort of audit your knowledge and skills. And from that, you can then, well, it then tells you what sort of areas it would be good for you to work on. And then it then lists the training that you could then do. So some of that training may have happened already, but we do have the recordings available from previous webinars, and some may be coming up in the future. So a really nice, easy way of thinking about your personal CPD. We've also got something similar, which is interactive, which is a training resources decision tree. So again, that makes you think about what resources are available for you through OAK National Academy, but also if you've got more than 12 lessons a year, what else you could use, what other resources are available to extend your lessons if you've got the time and the knowledge and skills in order to be able to do that. And that links in nicely with the curriculum planner decision trees as well. So all of these resources we've got will really support you and your own CPD, but particularly planning your curriculum for your pupils throughout Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2. Roy mentioned the audit. That's a really nice, simple tool to use. And then everybody loves a SMART goal. We always have to do SMART goals. So we've put together some SMART goal planners for you around this, which will help you think about the real reasons why you're going to be doing your CPD and looking at your curriculum and coming up with some goals that you want to be working towards. And then, as I'd mentioned, everything we've done before has been recorded, so it is available for you on the website to go back and have a look at. If you want to know a bit more information around how we actually put the curriculum together, what it's based on, and a bit more detail maybe around the resources. And in other webinars, Roy's actually done some more detailed sort of deep dives into the resources actually on the website and shown you around different areas of the website. So if you wanted to have a look at that, that's all there for you as well. And all of these things are available on Food A Fact of Life. So when you get this recording, or you have a look online, the presentation will be there as well, and you'll be able to follow the links and it will take you to Food A Fact of Life, where you'll find all of these things. So some other things for next steps, as Roy has said before, just try and become familiar with the resources and the lessons that are available for you. Have a look at them, try some of them out. Have a think about which ones fit in with what you're currently doing now, but then actually which ones you can use to extend your learning and your own lesson, your personal learning, but your pupils' learning. Audit what you currently do and identify any gaps. And then just give it a go, particularly around the recipes. There are some fantastic new recipes there for you to try. And what we would do is make sure, please, that you do trial them at home before you use them in school. It's a really good thing for good practice for your own CPD, but also to make sure that when you come to do them in lessons, they actually do work for you and your pupils. We have all tried and tested them. We do know they work, but obviously people's equipment, their setting, their cookers all run in different ways, so just double check them first. Use the tools on Food A Fact of Life to help you, and then join us for the next training session. And the next training session will actually be taking place on the 9th of December. And the one tonight has been specifically for primary schools. The one on the 9th of December is actually going to be a more general one, but it will be very much appropriate for you as well. And we're going to be designing a modern food curriculum then. So that should hopefully allow you some space and some time to think about what you do now and what you'd like to do for the future. Thank you, Roy. So any questions? I'll just have a quick look at the chat just to see if there are any questions. If not, I've got a couple of questions for you, Roy, before we finish. Right, we've got somebody typing. That might be a question, but whilst we're waiting, Roy, we've covered a huge amount today, as we tend to in all of the webinars that we do. But if somebody's starting from scratch, thinking about what they can do with their cooking and nutrition lessons, where should they start?
Well, to me, the first thing would just get yourself familiar, go onto the Oak website and just start looking at the lessons. So think about the key stage perhaps that you look after, or the year group that you currently look after. Think about the sorts of things you might have done before and just get a feel for the lessons. Just go through and think about, oh, could I do this? And if so, how could I do it? And what might be some of the barriers, but then what would see some of the opportunities? So we've all got to start somewhere. And I just think going to the website and having a look at some of the resources is probably the most quickest way just to get to grips of what's available. So yeah, just have a quick peek.
Fantastic. And I would thoroughly agree with that. And then actually this one actually was really around what your favourite lesson is. I think it was nice to end with something like this. So yeah, what would you say in primary, what your favourite lesson is?
Yeah, I kind of, there's one around I think it's called something like our rich global food cuisine. And it was really trying to get pupils to think about the whole thing about diversity and about food and culture and heritage. But what we've also done in that unit of lessons, we also explore about sensory stuff. So food from different cultures and things that might be familiar or less familiar to you. And I think I've always liked that kind of concept. And also we've looked at different customs around the world which are linked to foods, and that might be something that people can talk about and resonate with them. And in fact, that unit then ends up making a really interesting type of bread from the Ukraine called paska. So I think that's a nice one because it starts off really big, really globally, and about diversity and all that stuff, and valuing all the pupils in your classes and all their cultures. And then it boils down to actually making something concrete, but still of interest. And obviously, we're supporting our friends in the Ukraine too by making Pascha. But I think that's one of my favourites.
Yeah, and Pascha, that Pascha recipe is really lovely. So it's got a really lovely orangey flavour to it, hasn't it? That's the sort of the basic flavour to that bread. Fantastic. Thanks, Roy. We do actually have one question. So I'm a nutritionist and working with primary schools to teach through food sensory workshops. The only thing which I lack is about the lack of timings. Do you have any tips?
Yeah, I think probably maybe there's something that I'm happy to pick up afterwards, because that might be get into a bit more detail. So if we can grab the email address, and I don't mind getting in touch. Time is always going to be a problem, whether in primary school or secondary school. As always with sensory work, I think it's really valuable. I think it's great, but start small, make it really simple, and just have set goals. So you're going to try 3 things in the next 30 minutes or whatever it happens to be. But I'd be very happy to have a conversation offline, so it's more direct and I fully understand what your situation is. Not a problem.
Fantastic. Thank you, Roy. That's I'm sure that would be appreciated. So thank you very much for joining us tonight. Thank you, Roy, for your input. It's always great to have you with me on these webinars. We'd be very grateful if you could complete the evaluation, please. It will only take you a couple of minutes to do. And then once you've completed it, you will then receive a link to a downloadable certificate that you can add your name to, and then print it out and keep it for your CPD records. So thank you very much, and we hope to see you on the next event, which is on the 12th of December. If you can't join us, it will be recorded, so do watch it on Catch Up, and do have a look at all the previous webinars that we have done. So this is number 6 out of 10, so there's lots there for you to have a look at. So thank you very much. Have a great evening, and we hope to see you soon. Bye-bye.